Hey, Bitcoin wealth builders, Simon Dixon here, and welcome to episode 81 of Bitcoin Hard Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about this week in macro, this week in Bitcoin, and this week in geopolitics, as always. And the main topic of today is, has America sold itself, and who has it sold itself to? I'm going to be going through all of that today, and that's going to be the overarching theme in both the Bitcoin side, the macro side, and the geopolitics side. I do have to tell you, if you've been watching the last few episodes, bragging rights, everything has been going the way that I said it would eventually go. So I think you're really prepared, and I'm going to get you more prepared for what I think comes next so that we can make decisions and we can review it each and every week. If you are new to the show, welcome to Bitcoin Hard Talk. This is where we prepare you for a world of Bitcoin AI and CBDCs, and we cover the most important events and share this journey together so that we can be prepared for what goes next. This week in Bitcoin, this week in macro, this week in geopolitics. And today the title is The US Just Got Bought and Palestine May Finally Be Free, which we'll be covering in the geopolitics section. So without further ado, let's go right in. As I said, if we have not met already, my name's Simon Dixon. I spent the last 25 years obsessing over the topics of investing and money, and for the last 14 years in Bitcoin, after speaking at the first Bitcoin conference and investing in over 100 different companies in the sector. So without further ado, let's go straight into part one, this week in Bitcoin, where we'll be covering this week's events. And in the macro section, we're going to be going through Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia, as well as all the key macro indicators that let us know whether we're moving in the direction of this multipolar world that I've been preparing people for. And then in part three, I'll be going through the latest geopolitical events. And it was absolutely a real game-changing week this week. But at the same time, the massacre is still continuing, and the humanitarian crisis is as unbearable as it has ever been. And so we'll be going through that and where I think this actually goes next. So let's jump in with part one, this week in Bitcoin. So firstly, there was a company called Griffin Digital Mining, which is a public company that is engaged in Bitcoin mining. And it was announced that they're doing a merger with American Bitcoin. And American Bitcoin is essentially the Trump family's Bitcoin mining company and a partnership with Hut 8. Hut 8 was involved in utilizing the assets from the Celsius bankruptcy in order to build a mining company called Ionic Digital, which is meant to be going public later this year. They're still going through the audit process for the victims of the Celsius scam. And the Celsius scam we covered last week, Mijinski got sentenced for his 12 years for the scam there. And the lesson of that, as always, is own your own Bitcoin, own more Bitcoin this month than the previous month, and recognize that there are many, many different companies that want to get in the middle between you and your Bitcoin. But Bitcoin gave you the freedom where you don't need to do that. But it is also secured by proof of work. And proof of work is the world's largest distributed supercomputer that has mining across the Middle East, mining across America, mining across China, Russia, Iran, and everywhere across the global south as well, so that no one political entity can control the mining. And it is the world's largest distributed supercomputer. And so one by one, all countries are capitulating to that reality. In Abu Dhabi, you had the infamous Phantom Mining public company of Bitcoin mining. And now the Trump administration, through his family, are launching his Bitcoin mining company, which is American Bitcoin. It was a merger, and 98% of the company will now be owned and go public. And they're looking to create another Bitcoin mining company. As the Trump administration, if you followed the money that we're always talking about, essentially he's launching stable coins so that you can receive the yield on the government debt, which is almost like going short the dollar and then using that yield in order to buy Bitcoin so you can go long Bitcoin. And so what we do at Bitcoin Hard Talk is we follow the money of the politicians rather than listen to the politicians, because it is always the complete opposite of what they're actually saying. And so there will be another Bitcoin mining company, and I'm sure they'll be using the mining infrastructure that's been set up in Texas, which is making the grid more efficient, because when you have excess capacity, you can use that excess electricity capacity to mine Bitcoin, and it can pay for ever more renewable energy and a lot of innovation when you can repurpose it, which is what we're seeing across the world right now by being able to utilize Bitcoin mining. And with that in mind, we're seeing more and more MicroStrategy, now called Strategy, Michael Saylor type companies that are looking to create new, using the debt capital markets and the equity capital markets in order to give people more exposure to Bitcoin from within a public company infrastructure. If you watch previous episodes, and you can go back to my YouTube video, my YouTube channel, Simon Dixon on YouTube, and you can see where I've covered, how to not get yourself caught in the middle of too many of these companies. But the creator of the largest annual Bitcoin conference, David Bailey, he used to be involved in the Bitcoin scene in China. Now he's involved in America, and more recently the Middle East as well. Well, he's launching his new public Bitcoin company. So that went public this week. I'm not sure if it owns any Bitcoin yet, but it looks like he's going out to try and raise 300 million. I think that was doubled as well. So there's going to be a lot of these, and there are a lot of them coming. At the same time, you've got more and more innovation in the stablecoin side of the business. So MoonPay, which is an easy mechanism for onboarding, offboarding via card payments from fiat currency to Bitcoin and crypto. It announced MoonPay announced a partnership with MasterCard now. And they're going to be integrating with stable coins. Now, I did go through the interviews and I tried to figure out what exactly is it doing with these stable coin payments, because the reality is that if you're a merchant and you want to accept stable coin payments, which is a digital dollar that anyone can spend and can be sent, on a blockchain without a bank in the middle, then you just need a QR code and you can just do it through your phone. You don't really need it integrated into one of those point-of-sale terminals that people tap with their phone. But maybe it'll be integrated into those point-of-sale terminals. I'm not quite sure what the point of those are in the future. I think everything will be done in mobile and new technology, and you don't really need the POS. But what is it going to be doing with stable coins? Well, I'll keep watching and I'll give those updates, but they were a little bit light on the detail. But essentially, they pitched it as you'll be able to spend your stable coins in 150 million businesses globally now. And obviously, if you can spend your stable coins, you should also be able to spend your Bitcoin as well, if you want to do that. So we'll keep watching that. But stable coins are 100% going to be an integral part of the strategy. And the Trump administration is divvying up those stable coins to all their buddies so that they can find a new mechanism for issuing a stable coin with the technocrats and Trump's own company, World Liberty Financial, backing it by the dot and by the debt and treasuries, just like Tether does via Cantor Fitzgerald, whose founder is Howard Lutnick, who is the Commerce Secretary. You can see that, and Cantor Fitzgerald is a direct bond dealer for US debt. And so you can see through this mechanism, they're building a way of being able to push out more US debt to the American people now that foreign investors are investing less because of the trends that we've been talking about, and I'll continue to talk about in the macro section. So stable coins are an integral part of it as well. More and more public companies. It is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the world races to try and get those Bitcoins, which is the theme. And I want you to make sure that you are, however you're doing it, eventually that you're self-sovereign. You own more Bitcoin this month than the previous month, and you're holding it in self-custody rather than having a middle person hold those Bitcoins for you. We also had an announcement from Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong. Full disclosure, many years ago, I invested in Coinbase when it was a public company, when it was a private company, rather, in the early days. And it went public for $100 billion. Basically, is now that public company has become big enough where they're now in the S&P 500. So this is now the first Bitcoin crypto company in the Standard & Poor's 500 index, and that starts next Monday. The implication is that when people buy the S&P 500 ETFs, which is a way of passively investing by handing over all of your voting rights to the exchange-traded fund issuer, like BlackRock and every institutions, this is how they gain significant power. But when you do that, they have to buy all of the companies in the 500, the S&P 500, and it's weighed across that, but it adds more liquidity to those stocks, and you end up with more buying pressure as a result of those ETFs and more selling pressure if it goes on the reverse side. I've covered Jack Mallers, who launched 21 Capital. That went public, and now they bought the first 4,812 Bitcoin, which is worth $458 million now. Again, I'm just telling you what's happening. The main story for me is not that I'm going to be engaging. This is a way of getting leverage exposure, but you're adding key person risk in the middle between your Bitcoin. Now, they may be able to do more interesting stuff. They may be able to access more capital when they use the equity capital markets and the debt capital markets to raise finance and therefore increase the price at a premium to Bitcoin. But then you've got another strategy in the middle. So that needs to be risk managed if you're engaging in these things. My suggestion is everybody just needs to get Bitcoin first. And then you can get more advanced and understand more exotic strategies. And I covered in previous videos and previous episodes what can go wrong with these as well, and how you can create the systemic risk event that I've been warning people against. I believe that will happen eventually. I don't know the timing on it, but it is building an infrastructure with more and more of these companies, integrating it with more and more stablecoin, because I think they want to rug pull you and get your Bitcoin. And we saw exactly how that worked in 2022. When the Fed did a series of events and an operation called Operation Choke Point 2.0 in order to crash the market, then recover the market. And those that had Bitcoin outside of the ecosystem were fine. But those that were stuck in some of these centralized companies ended up in a disaster situation. Another company that I invested in early as private equity that is now public, Robinhood. They made an announcement that they have acquired Canada's leading crypto trading platform. I think it's called, what is it called? WonderFi. And so, that is Robinhood also acquired another company I invested in back in the day, the largest European exchange. Invested, I think it was way back over 10 years ago now, which was Bitstamp. So they're taking many of these exchanges and rolling them up into these public companies, and the industry is consolidating more and more and more as the sector gets bigger and bigger and bigger. One of the public companies in Brazil, Malias, I may not have said that correctly, but they're also doing the Bitcoin treasury strategy in Brazil. You're getting them all around the world popping up right now. They announced that they bought $28.4 million worth of Bitcoin, and that becomes Brazil's first Bitcoin treasury company, essentially. And so what these companies are doing is they're holding their reserves in Bitcoin to remain sovereign, and also it underwrites to the value of Bitcoin part of their company while they have trading activities that allow them to take those dollars or their local currency and then hold it in Bitcoin and give people exposure to Bitcoin indirectly as well. So that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're seeing more of those launch all around the world. There was an announcement on the BRICS side from the central bank of Russia, and it reported within its financial statements that Bitcoin is the top performing investment of 2025. If you want to see that report, I published it on my X account. Follow me over on X, and you can get updates in real time. And on the other side of the proof of weapons network is the Ukraine. Ukraine made an announcement today that is looking at that is at the final stages of preparing a bill to create a national Bitcoin reserve. Now, this one's a bit strange because obviously Russia has a sovereign central banking system, and it has national assets like oil and natural gas and various other rare earths. And so those countries that have their own resources are able to use those assets in order to purchase Bitcoin strategic reserves. The problem with America at the moment is America has a twin fiscal deficit and trade deficit, and therefore purchasing Bitcoin strategic reserves is challenging at the federal level because they don't have the reserves, because they export dollars around the world, and so therefore they're in debt. And they need to they have a debt-based Ponzi scheme through the Federal Reserve System that requires them to continually increase the debt. And basically the dollar is debt. And so if you try and pay down that debt, you crash the economy and create a depression. Even though politicians will tell you they're trying to pay down the debt, it's just not possible. And so now they've hit a 125% debt to GDP ratio, which does not include the additional 250 trillion of committed liabilities that America has right now for Medicare, Social Security, interest on the debt, and the war machine that the military industrial complex benefits from, which props up the dollar proof of weapons debt-based Ponzi scheme as well. And so for Ukraine to do that, because Ukraine is fully vassalized, Ukraine was obviously targeted by the proof of weapons network. The CIA launched operations in order to vassalize it. And now approximately 50% of all the land and all the assets are owned by BlackRock, because BlackRock, through controlling ETFs and managing all these pensions, is able to create a shadow government that is way bigger and way more influential than the actual government. So the actual government works for BlackRock. I covered this whole structure last week. If you didn't watch episode 80, I covered how it's BlackRock versus the world. And BlackRock's a metaphor for a more complex structure, but let's just use the word BlackRock for now. But you can go back last work and you can see that. And so now they use war through the deep state and controlling intelligence in order to aggravate these wars. But now Ukraine is just, carved up for BlackRock, for the UK, which is essentially a vassal state for BlackRock portfolio companies as well. They were securing the land and country in order to borrow more, in order to send more money to Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and Raytheon, so that you could take and steal money from the Europeans, the Brits, and the Americans, and send it over to those large corporations so that BlackRock's portfolio companies could increase in value. And when you vassalize a state like Ukraine right now, where essentially they're just negotiating, US wants all of its rare earth minerals, not for US, but for its corporations that need those rare earth, which are BlackRock portfolio companies. And then BlackRock gets the most, the land, and then the rest of it goes to Russia, which is the operation that was set up. They also get to remove the dependency of Europe from Russia, so that they could end up buying the gas from the natural gas companies in America. So, this is how the proof of weapons network works. The country no longer becomes about you. It doesn't become about America first, Britain first, European first. It just becomes about you becoming a pawn for narratives that justify the proof of weapons operations that ends up extracting value from you, making the middle class poorer, and ending up with the large corporations that control the political process. And that's exactly what Zelensky is, and all of these puppet leaders like Starmer and Macron and all of these others that are just meeting up in order to steal money from the British people, the Europeans, as living conditions get worse and worse and worse because none of the governments are working for those people anymore. And as BlackRock is doing for America right now, I'll cover more of that in the macro section when we cover Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia. But essentially, Ukraine is saying that they're going to have a national Bitcoin reserve. But what are they going to use to buy that? Because they don't have reserves. They are no longer a sovereign state because BlackRock did a hostile takeover and is killing Ukrainians in order to extract as much value from that for the profits and using the proof of weapons network in order to achieve that. In the meantime, over back in America with the Trump administration, Eric Trump came out and says that there is a race to the top to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. So while I never listen to what people say unless their investments and their money matches it, and in this case, the Trump administration is buying as much Bitcoin through his family structures, including Bitcoin mining companies, including the launching of stable coins, including the launching of pump and dump scam meme coins in order to extract and end up with more Bitcoin. They're using every mechanism possible, whether it's stable coins and NFTs or meme coins or mining Bitcoin, anything they can do to get as much Bitcoin as possible for the Trump family, as is many other people in the Trump administration. And still, America doesn't have a Bitcoin strategic reserve. However, I believe BlackRock wants to break up America into parts, into separate states as an operation while they weaken Europe and destroy the UK, which is what they've been doing. And America's the next, or has been, a target as well. And so the states are starting to get Bitcoin strategic reserves approved. Now, it remains to be seen whether they'll start to use them, but it looks like they're sending more power to the states and less power to the Fed. But we shall see what happens. But you can see what those games are. But in the meantime, the politicians are accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible. And BlackRock is getting all of the banks and financial institutions and states that manage their money through BlackRock to get their Bitcoin positions built up as BlackRock transitions the world into this multipolar world order that I've been sharing for a long time now. Okay. Now, with Coinbase, there was a bit of a news announcement. And it's pretty interesting. And again, this plays into us understanding what's happening with artificial intelligence, so you can get ahead of it right now. But there was a ransom demand by some data hackers with Coinbase, where they were demanding $20 million in Bitcoin from Coinbase, and they were threatening to leak the customer data that they alleged they had acquired. And so the CEO, Brian Armstrong, decided to do an open source counterattack to the ransom, which I think is an interesting approach and strategy in this new digital world that we are going through. So publicly, CEO Brian Armstrong of Coinbase on his X account came out and said, we're not going to pay the ransom. And instead said that he would offer a $20 million reward for any information that people can give that leads to understanding the attack and would lead to the attacker's arrest. And so they put some conditions around that, but they came out and publicly disclosed what was happening. Now, what he said is that it was by targeting some of their employees from their offshore, outside of America, customer service center. And as a result, he said that they're going to be bringing in more of the customer support into America. But we know what that means. Anybody that has been following the AI side will know that it has been getting exponential growth, and the innovation of agents, where you can essentially employ an AI agent that can be programmed in order to fulfill a certain function, like build some expertise in customer support. I think that's what they mean. By re-onshoring into America, it is a political way of saying we're going to be replacing those staff with AI agents. And so that's what I think the strategy will be. And that is exactly the strategy that is being deployed with these quote unquote re-onshoring of the manufacturing base that we're going to be seeing within America at the moment, which means there's going to be significantly less jobs. And the interesting thing, and I'll tie this into the macro when we cover the announcements from Trump and from his Middle Eastern tour, is that they're saying this is the key selling point, that it's going to be jobs. And those are temporary jobs. So you need to protect yourself and understand the games that are happening. And I think that ties into what we may see, my speculation, when they say re-onshoring jobs. So I'll keep watching that trend. But I know that that's exactly what businesses are doing right now. And I believe that everybody should be treating this as absolutely urgent. You should be. I had somebody that came on a space yesterday and asked me about their 17-year-old son and whether he should go do a law degree. And my advice was, in 3 years, I think it's more likely that there won't be lawyers than there are getting any kind of return on investment in a law degree in the current environment. The exponential growth of artificial intelligence with agents and everything that's happening right now, everybody needs to treat it as a personal family emergency. I mean, if you have a son or daughter or children at that age, you really need to be educating them into artificial intelligence. You know, these universities and colleges, they have brands, but these are the final remnants of the pre-artificial intelligence world. They need to be getting their skills quickly, as fast as possible in AI, working with businesses that need to transition, utilizing the skills themselves, and disrupting traditional industries and colleges and universities rather than spending the next 3 years there. And as you make money through artificial intelligence, convert it into sovereign wealth, i.e. Bitcoin in self-custody, to protect yourself from these trends. Because as artificial intelligence becomes more programmatic into the future, we need to fight back with open source. We need to fight back with decentralized. And Bitcoin, the decentralized network, has proven what that looks like. And so you need to really be adjusting. And if you feel that's not for you, then treat it like a family, treat it like a community, and have your family meetings now and think, is my son and daughter going to be doing this? Am I going to be doing this? Or am I going to be working with somebody else in order to do this? But everybody needs to be doing this. And then they need to be saving in Bitcoin and building sovereign decentralized systems, or working with sovereign decentralized system. Or at the very least, if you're going to be working with those physical activities that are going to be replaced with robotics into the future, recognize there is a shelf life. And you need to be involved in the manufacturing base around robotics and AI, whether that's energy, whether it's natural gas, whether it's oil, whether it's semiconductor chips, whether it's data centers, whether it's steel manufacturing, for data centers and these component parts, whether it's building out these large data centers. Whether it's stable coins or software on top of artificial intelligence, whether it's Bitcoin mining, whether it's Bitcoin, this is where the world is going. And you have a few years. You should treat it as an urgency right now to get as much Bitcoin as you can by playing this trend, because you're alive at this time when we are, we're not going to see changes like this. And I believe in 5 to 10 years, you're not going to recognize the world, as well as this switch to multipolarity. And in a multipolar world where there's not a dominance by one currency, the dollar, that's backed up by a proof of weapons network, I believe that Bitcoin will be urgent through that transition as the only digital hard money that exists on a distributed supercomputer that is like digital gold without the physicality. But also, you could own your own money, spend your own money, and a monetary policy that will never change. If you're not got your head around this stuff, get your head around it now and treat it as an emergency. Even if I'm wrong, I don't think I am wrong, but even if I am wrong, then at least you'll be prepared for this and ahead of the curve. Right, what else announcement did we have? On the Bitcoin side, we had an announcement from Dubai. Dubai is going to be partnering with crypto.com in order to accept crypto for government services. So the governments are looking to get into that. This has been a thing that's been going on. I first pitched this to the UK government 12 years ago in 2013. Boris Johnson laughed me out of the room. We managed to get the Isle of Man government in 2014 to do it. And then the Bank of England did an attack saying, we'll ruin clearing to your island if you support this industry. And then later, when President Bukele did it with El Salvador, we started to get this trend. And then when the Trump administration, they're looking at Bitcoin as a strategy for the country. And obviously the Middle East has been building their Bitcoin strategic reserves, utilizing a mining already. And BRICS is now starting to clear trade between those countries that are building alternative payment system in an environment of de-dollarization. And then countries which are fully under the control that are being destroyed by BlackRock and their portfolio companies, they're not building Bitcoin strategic reserves like UK and Europe. So understand that these things are happening. You need to protect yourself. But at the sovereign level, the countries that are actually sovereign with sovereign wealth are seeing Bitcoin as a mechanism for being relevant as we transition to a world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs. At the same time, Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, they disclosed that they had, it's not the biggest position, but a $408 million investment in BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF. I expect that to continue to increase as we're seeing more and more of utilization. But I think the main thing they're doing is utilizing energy and engaging in mining. And so rather than just buying it through BlackRock, I think this is a token gesture whereby the Middle Eastern countries, as we transition to this multipolar world, if you watched my video last week, you'll know that I said they've been building economic partnerships where they remain sovereign, so they don't become vassal states like America, Europe, and UK to BlackRock, but they've been partnering with BlackRock, but remaining sovereign so that they can have relevance and economic influence in this multipolar world order, which is the strategy that's been developed. And so holding some of their Bitcoin with BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF is kind of this economic gestures as these negotiations happen, as the world is changed. Also, Binance founder CZ, I've covered CZ's story many times. Basically, it was shut down, or he was attacked by the Department of Justice, engaged in shady shit, had to flee China, then had to flee Japan, then had to flee America, essentially. And then eventually America, through the DOJ, managed to install their own compliance team. And then he started working with those in Middle Eastern, either Dubai, where he ended up, and then working with Abu Dhabi for his company so that they could get access to essentially the future of capital markets. Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund invested $2 billion in Binance, and they got approximately 270 million users. As Abu Dhabi is looking to become the center of capital markets using tokenized securities between BRICS, which is transitioning to their distributed ledger and Bitcoin-backed systems and clearing in these different stable coins and Bitcoin as well, while America builds this Bitcoin strategic reserves either at the state level or the federal level so that they can sit in the center of the world as BlackRock essentially manages transition. And BlackRock has said they're going to be launching a tokenized exchange. They're weaponizing their influence through the SEC to drive this along, their influence at the Trump administration and their influence in the Middle Eastern regions. And I can see when you follow the money, everything's being moved towards asset stripping the American capital markets and transitioning to tax neutral jurisdictions so that money can flow between BRICS and America as they use tokenization as the mechanism with stable coins so that they can essentially get as much Bitcoin as possible. Just like fiat currency was a mechanism for central banks extracting value so that they end up with the gold, and then they can move the gold around in order to influence geopolitical power. I think they're building their Bitcoin positions, and as long as you hold it in self-custody, then you're able to remain sovereign and do the same as them so that you can build economic power and influence this political process. But we need more sovereignty rather than handing over your power to BlackRock so they can become more powerful and then weaponize their power against you and your countries, as we are seeing right now. But anyway, Bitcoin founder CZ came out and said Abu Dhabi is the AI and blockchain center of the world. And we are seeing that, and that really leads into the macro section where we're going to be going through Trump's visit and the purpose of that. And so that is really everything that I've got for this week in Bitcoin in part 1 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 81. And we're now going to move over to the macro section. Now, I'm going to go through the key macro indicators that we're looking at as we transition to this world of the multipolar world order that I've been forecasting, and some of the key indicators of that. And we're going to be doing that in the macro section. And then I'm going to be going through Trump's interview in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to be deconstructing the bits that they won't tell you, as I often do, because people like it when I play these interviews and then give my commentary throughout it. So what I would love for you to do right now, I've been trying to get to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we're starting to get more and more people that are listening to Bitcoin Hard Talk every week on Apple Podcast and on Spotify. So if you are not a member of, if you have not followed me on Bitcoin Hard Talk, so go over to Apple Podcast, type in Bitcoin Hard Talk, and also do the same for Spotify if you prefer that. Then you can follow me, and then you can download and auto-download episodes each week. You can do this in parts if it's too long. You can do it while you're in the gym. You can do it wherever you are, because I want you to have the information each week. I give up to 3 hours of content as I do this, but sometimes people like to break it into parts. I upload it to YouTube in 3 parts or 1 part if you want to do the whole thing. But we want to make sure that you're consuming the content. So please head over to Apple Podcast and Spotify. Follow me so that you can get those downloaded to your phone. And if you don't have the time, you can do it while you're at the gym. No extra time, while you're driving or whatever it is that you're doing. And please help me subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and also follow me on Rumble in case YouTube rugs us. We've noticed that suddenly we seem to have broken the shadow ban. So we're trying to get through 100,000 subscribers right now. We're at 95.2 thousand subscribers. So please, if everyone watching this hits it, the algorithm is showing us love. Once we get to 100K, we become a YouTube partner, and we can make sure this content gets out to a lot more people and they can be more prepared. So I'm just going to take some water before we move into part 2. And while we're doing that, please add a comment, do like, please repost and subscribe, and head over, put Bitcoin Hard Talk, and make sure that you're subscribed, because I've got more and more information, and it's getting vital as we make this transition. Now these technologies are going viral, exponential. And so I'll take some water. You do that right now. And then we're going to go through this week in macro in part 2, and this week in geopolitics in part 3.